it would all be washed over eventually in the end, and people just settle down with whatever they were spoon-fed by Microsoft. Now it appears, when we're in this era of choice and diversity in technology, that people are willing to stand up and voice their dissatisfaction, and people will vote with their wallets. And whilst Microsoft, in my view, spends a lot of its time worrying about its corporate image and PR campaigns and special offers and competitions, it's really missing the point with its core supporters who are really losing faith with Microsoft. Gordon, you haven't spoken for a few minutes. I don't know if you've got any opinion on that.
Yeah, I think Microsoft have long had I don't know, it's strange, right, because when you've got other platforms, one of the excuses Microsoft always give, or the reasons they always give, is we've got to test these updates, for updates, breaking systems and things like that. Not just on Windows Phone 7, but on Windows itself and on Office itself. They keep giving the same excuse over and over again, regardless of the platform, that it must be well tested on all sorts of hardware combinations and all that. Well, Linux runs on all sorts of hardware. That doesn't break anywhere near as much as Windows does. And the thing is, with Windows, any Windows partners, Windows companies that work with Windows that make drivers for their hardware only for Windows, they've got the inside track on with NDAs and things like that. They work together with the code that's hidden from Linux people. The Linux people have got to disassemble that and try to find ways to work with it, with just binaries. And we get it right. They've got the inside track, they've got all the advantage, and they don't get it right. I mean, seriously, And it's the same excuse over and over again. It's got to be well tested. Well tested to what? They screwed up the very first update, the one where they had to get they have the image of being this machine that people have to fight with at work all day, like their Windows computer. And then when you see about, get a Windows phone, it's actually different. It's nothing to do with Windows, but it's got the Windows brand. It doesn't have all the same baggage that comes with Windows. Try it, trust it. Honestly, it's something new. It's something in the very first update they get. First of all, it's not got very many features. And then secondly, when that's pointed out and they say, well, we'll add copy and paste on an update, and then the update screws up, they've got all that control over their partners, all that collaboration with their partners for all these different platforms, and they still screw it up. Not only do they screw it up the first time, that when it's actually, when the backlash hits about them screwing it up the first time, they then take it back to the drawing board and get it tested again, and then they try it again, and it still screws up. I mean, how incompetent do you need to be to work for Microsoft? Honestly, how incompetent do you need to be? And that's them saying, that's the very first impression that people have of this supposedly all-new Microsoft, supposedly all-new efficient system that they've come up with, built from the ground up. It's nothing to do with this legacy system of Windows. It's nothing to do with any of that. We've actually learned our lessons. We've built it really good this time. And then the very first thing that people see is that update fails. And what? I mean, seriously, how bad do Microsoft need to be before people actually give up on them?
Well, I mean, the thing was, I'll go back to March 2010 here, and it was Galen Grumman of InfoWorld who said, and I'll quote him word perfectly, "This as yet unreleased Windows Phone 7 is a waste of time and money, a disaster that Microsoft should kill as soon as possible." These are people talking about future failures without the thing even hitting the streets. So, and this wasn't a surprise to anybody, it appears, but Microsoft themselves. I think many people in the tech world, many people with blogs wrote about the concerns they would have with Microsoft coming to the party, so to speak, late with Windows Phone 7. And that was forgetting about the issues of the update failures that we've had, and there's been issues of gobbling data and all sorts of things. So it's a very sad testament, but of course, the way that the Microsoft machine works, just like we saw with Kin, up to the very bitter end, it was all singing and dancing, and there was praise coming out of Twitter from various accounts. I remember one Twitter advocate, and I use those in inverted commas, told me that the Kin was the greatest social networking phone ever made. Well, it lasted 62 days. So it just goes to show you that up until a bitter end, these things will be promoted and championed and praised, and it's unfortunately it's the end users that suffer, the people that do buy into these campaigns, that end up suffering when they spend the money on these devices.
I heard on I think it was the Engadget podcast, and they go to various trade shows and things like that, and they actually talk to representatives of all these various companies like Nokia and Microsoft and all these different companies, and at one point they found themselves in this was about tablet computing, and they found themselves in like a Microsoft presentation, and they were talking to various journalists and tech sites were talking to Microsoft employees, and they said, well, what's the sort of tablet strategy? What's the tablet OS? Because tablets are starting to take off. What's Microsoft's answer to that? And they were adamant that Windows 7 is their tablet thing, and no matter how many people pointed out to them, Windows 7 doesn't work on a tablet. It's far too heavy. They need something specific for a lighter device, but they are adamant that Windows 7 is for tablets. And if anything, all they're going to do is put some sort of skin over the top of it to sort of rearrange the UI a little bit, but it's still Windows 7. And they just don't get it. They seriously don't get it. They just assume that, well, for the last 20 odd years, we've had the power in boardrooms to be able to force our stuff down people's throats and not give consumers a choice, and that everywhere you look, all you're going to see is tablets with Windows on it, Windows Phone 7 or whatever they're going to call it. They just assume they're going to be able to do that, and they just don't get it. They seriously don't get it.
I mean, we could quote the opinions all day of the Phone 7 itself and how it was interpreted or perceived by end users or by people that commenting on Tech Matters. But I think now we're getting to get to the point whereby people know what the Phone 7 is, and maybe that's why we don't get. I certainly don't know anybody who owns one of these devices. I've asked, I've put out offers on my site before. On the TechBytes show. And said, if anybody's got one of these things, let me know. But certainly within my circle of friends, I can't think of anybody who's even considered buying one, let alone actually owning one. And it's very funny because you look at the way that that some of the advocates of the Windows Phone 7 try to cheapen the competition. I'm not too sure what they say about the Apple products because I don't have an iPhone, so I'm not particularly that interested in looking at what's being said. But when you look at what's being said about Android, for example, you can't make as much money on the Android platform. You can't make any money as a developer on the Android platform. I think it's very telling about how desperate the level of attack is now against the Android platform, which you see as a big threat, or well, it's not a threat, it's beyond that. It's now the competitor which I don't think they'll ever beat. And I always say in answer to you can't make any money with Android, well, developers better start making money, because if all the users are on Android, as a developer you can talk to you blue in the face about how great Windows Phone 7 is or the iPhone is, but if you haven't got the users to sell your product to, you're not going to make any money anyway. So now's the time to start looking at alternate revenue models if you want to stay in business as a developer. I think the buying power, it's a consumer's market now. I think the consumer has the power to dictate the platform, and it's certainly not the developer.
The smartest thing, if Mr. Ballmer was half as intelligent in business as he seems to be thinking he is, the smartest thing that he could have done with Windows Phone 7 is say, you know what, let's go away from the Windows brand. The Windows brand is tainted. We will create a new company, call it something completely different. We'll create the Windows Phone 7 operating system, and we'll call it something completely different. We'll brand it totally away from Windows and go with that, but they didn't.
They tried that.
Yeah, I was going to say the Majaf experiment.
They bought a company called Danger. This was the company where the maker of Android actually was involved until Microsoft bought the company. They tried to sell a Sidekick, which is now pretty much officially dead. I know that T-Mobile will not sell those phones anymore. And they also tried the Kin. So the Kin was an example, I suppose, of something that uses some of the components from Zune, or actually Zune is an example of something that doesn't use the Windows brand and actually concentrates on the experience of the device or the appearance of the device. without using the existing brands. And this brand also failed. And actually, Kin has become a very epic fail and became almost somewhat of a meme for something that just fails within, like, what was it, 7 weeks or something of that sort, 7 and a half.